On a chilly October afternoon in a small Vermont town, the sky hung low with heavy rain as Lauren moved quickly around her warm, dimly lit kitchen, trying to distract herself from the loneliness that had crept into her home ever since her husband Daniel began traveling more than he stayed. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside she focused on stirring a pot of her late mother's cinnamon maple recipe, something she had not made in years because it carried memories she wasn't always strong enough to revisit. She didn't expect company, especially not the sudden sound of the front door opening, followed by the thud of wet shoes. But when she turned, she saw Ethan, her 20-year-old stepson, standing there with his backpack slung over one shoulder, rain dripping from his dark hair. He had come home unannounced from college for the weekend, something he rarely did, and though she tried not to show it, she was caught off guard in a way that made her heart thump faster. Not out of romance or confusion, but because she was never fully sure how to connect with him. Ethan had always been polite, thoughtful, and distant, carrying the kind of quiet that made people wonder what storms he kept inside. And while they cared about each other, neither had learned how to break past the polite wall between them. The moment he stepped into the kitchen, his eyes widened at the smell drifting through the room. A warm mix of spice and sweetness that softened even the grayest corners of the day. He took a slow breath as if the air itself told a story. "It smells like something important," he said, shaking off his jacket and stepping closer, his curiosity faster than his words. Lauren felt a pinch in her chest, surprised by how much the comment meant to her, because nobody had recognized that smell, not in years, not since her mother, not since the days when cooking meant comfort instead of obligation. She told him it was a special recipe, her mother's, one she hadn't shared with anyone since she lost her. She didn't expect him to react, but something softened in his expression. A brief flicker of emotion she almost missed, and before she could overthink it, she lifted a spoon and asked if he wanted to taste it. The question slipped out fast, unplanned, leaving Ethan blinking in surprise because they had never shared something so personal. Not even a moment that felt like history pressing itself into the present. The storm outside roared louder, a low thunder that shook the walls. But the kitchen felt strangely quiet, like time paused just long enough for the two of them to notice the space between them shifting into something warmer, not romantic, not inappropriate, just more human. Ethan stepped closer, hesitated only a second, then accepted the spoon, tasting the warm mixture with a thoughtful seriousness that didn't match his usually reserved nature. Lauren watched as the flavor hit him, and she saw something like nostalgia form on his face. Even though he had no memory attached to the recipe, "It tastes like a place I've never been but wish I had," he murmured. And Lauren felt her throat tighten because that was exactly how the recipe had always felt to her. To a doorway to something lost, something safe. She didn't say anything, unsure how to respond. But she noticed him looking around the kitchen, taking in the old photos, the worn wooden table, the soft light that made everything feel gentler. Ethan had grown up between homes, between complicated relationships, and sometimes he carried that weight in his eyes. For the first time, she wondered if offering him that taste meant more than she realized. Before she could ask him why he had come home suddenly, why he looked heavier than usual, why his voice sounded tired even though he said everything was fine. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel's name flashed across the screen, pulling the moment apart before it could settle. She answered quickly, but his voice was rushed, distracted, half swallowed by highway noise, and within seconds he hung up again, leaving her with the cold reminder of how far he had drifted, even when he promised he wasn't. When she turned back to Ethan, he was leaning against the counter, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, part worry, part understanding, part something that came from being old enough to see the cracks adults tried to hide. She tried to smile, tried to lighten the air, but something unspoken had already taken root between them. Not a romance, not a confusion, just a moment of connection that neither expected. Ethan picked up the spoon again, tasting a little more as if trying to hold on to whatever comfort it offered. And Lauren felt a strange, emotional ache, not because of him, but because she realized how long it had been since she felt seen in her own home. The storm outside grew heavier. The kitchen lights flickered just slightly, and she sensed the story of the weekend shifting before it even began. Ethan looked at her as though he wanted to say something real, something difficult, but he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he simply said, "You should make this more often." And though the words were simple, they felt like an unexpected bridge. A small step toward a family that still had room to grow. And just as Lauren took a breath to respond, the power flickered again. Thunder cracked loudly through the sky, and the house seemed to hold its breath, leaving both of them wondering what else the weekend would bring. The next morning. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside glistening and quiet. And Lauren found herself back in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared another batch of her mother's cinnamon maple recipe. This time with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years, because yesterday's small, unexpected connection with Ethan had left her thinking about warmth, family, and the small ways people could touch each other's lives without realizing it. Ethan had stayed up late studying, but he appeared again mid-morning, walking into the kitchen with a sleepy, curious expression that made Lauren smile because even his casual presence seemed to brighten the space. And she realized that food had become a bridge between them, a way to share something deeply personal without needing long explanations or forced conversations. She handed him a fresh spoon, and as he tasted the soft, sweet cinnamon maple mixture, his eyes widened slightly, as if the flavor carried a memory he had never experienced but instantly understood. And he let out a quiet, appreciative laugh, the kind that warmed the corners of her heart in ways she hadn't expected. "It's like comfort in a bowl," he said, and Lauren nodded, feeling the same thought herself, realizing that the recipe wasn't just a dish, it was a way to feel connection, to feel family. And for a moment, the complicated dynamics of her home, the distance with Daniel, and the awkward stepson-stepmother relationship melted into something softer and easier to hold. Ethan leaned on the counter, holding the spoon in both hands, savoring the taste while looking around the kitchen as if noticing things he had never taken. The time to notice before the worn wooden cutting board, the little stains on the counter from years of cooking, the framed photos of Lauren's mother tucked in the corner, and Lauren felt an unexpected emotional pang, a mix of nostalgia, pride, and longing, because she realized that sharing this simple, honest piece of herself could be more meaningful than any word she could offer. He paused, swallowing slowly, and said, "I didn't know food could do this. Make you feel safe." His words hung in the air, and Lauren felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear or desire, but from the realization that he had picked up on the deeper layers of care and memory she had poured into the recipe, that he had seen her heart in a way she rarely let anyone see. She placed a hand over her chest, thinking about how many times she had cooked for others without anyone noticing the thought and love that went into it. And now, for the first time, someone had tasted not just the flavors, but the emotions, the family history, and the careful memories she had tried to preserve. Ethan looked at her, and for a brief second there was no stepson or stepmother. No rules or walls, just two people sharing a quiet, unexpected intimacy that belonged to the kitchen and the moment. Lauren felt her chest tighten with emotion, and she said softly, "It's my mother's recipe. She passed away before she could teach me everything. I guess I've always been afraid to make it for anyone else." Ethan set the spoon down carefully, his gaze steady and gentle, and said, "I'm glad you shared it with me." The simplicity and honesty of his words caught her off guard, and she realized that it wasn't just the taste that surprised him. It was that she had trusted him enough to share a part of her life that she had kept private for so long, something that held history, love, and loss all at once. She felt the air between them shift, warmer and more comfortable than it had been. And she noticed the small details, how he leaned slightly toward her as if seeking reassurance, how he smiled faintly after every bite, how he seemed to absorb the story behind the flavors without needing explanation. For the first time, she understood that connection didn't always need words. that sometimes it came from shared moments, small gestures, and trust that could grow stronger over time. But before she could speak again, the phone on the counter buzzed, breaking the bubble of intimacy they had created. Daniel's name appeared, and she hesitated, caught between answering and letting the moment continue. She answered quickly, hearing his voice from the road, rushed, distracted, and full of the familiar tension that had been growing between them for months. A tension that made her heart ache even as she tried to hide it. The conversation was brief, a flurry of work updates and promises to call later. And when she hung up, the kitchen felt emptier despite Ethan still standing there, watching her with quiet attentiveness. She turned back and he gave a small understanding nod, not pressing her to explain, just acknowledging the weight she carried. And she felt a mix of gratitude and sadness, because it reminded her that even small, tender moments could be interrupted by the realities of life. And yet the moment wasn't lost, it lingered in the way he looked at her. The way the sunlight hit the counter, the way the recipes seemed to fill the room with more than just scent. Ethan leaned against the counter, studying her with a curiosity that felt more like care than judgment, and said softly, "You shouldn't have to hide things like this. You deserve someone to see it all." Lauren felt a lump in her throat, realizing that he was right. But it wasn't about romantic love or complicated feelings. It was about acknowledgement, recognition, and the quiet warmth that comes from being understood. She smiled faintly, a little shy, and nodded. And Ethan smiled back, a small, steady expression that somehow made the kitchen feel like home. They fell into an easy rhythm, speaking in soft tones, sharing small stories from college and memories from home, letting the cinnamon maple dish act as a bridge between them. And Lauren realized that the weekend might bring more of these moments. Moments where family didn't need perfection, where connections grew slowly and sincerely, and where trust could be rebuilt in quiet, honest ways. The sun shifted through the window, catching the steam rising from the pot. And Lauren noticed the beauty in the ordinary. A shared meal, laughter, small revelations, and the comfort of someone truly noticing the care and emotion she had put into her life. She realized that Ethan's surprise yesterday was not just about the taste, but about the recognition. The understanding that someone finally saw her heart in a small, tangible form. And as he took another careful bite, savoring the sweetness, the warmth, and the memory-infused flavors, Lauren felt a flicker of hope that maybe the walls between them, between family members and between her and the life she wanted, could start to soften one shared moment at a time, leaving both of them surprised not by the food itself, but by the gentle closeness it had created, a closeness that promised more conversations, more shared mornings, and a new rhythm to the household that was full of small, emotional victories that mattered more than words could ever fully capture. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that felt heavy with thoughts left unsaid. And Lauren found herself sitting on the couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, staring at the flickering light from the kitchen that spilled warmth into the living room. Daniel had been on the road all day, his calls brief and distracted. And the silence of the house made her realize just how much distance had grown between them over the past months. She tried to busy herself with a book, but her mind kept returning to the earlier moments with Ethan. How he had tasted the cinnamon maple recipe with such care. How his eyes had softened in a way that made her feel unexpectedly seen. The emotional weight of that simple act lingered with her, and she realized that it was more than just the food. It was a bridge. A moment of connection in a family that often felt fragmented. She heard the soft creak of stairs, a sound that had become familiar over the years, and looked up to see Ethan standing there, hesitant, unsure if he should speak or retreat. There was something in the way he paused before stepping fully into the living room, as if measuring whether it was safe to say what was on his mind. Lauren set the blanket tighter around her shoulders and smiled gently, inviting him to sit without needing to say anything. He moved slowly, taking the seat across from her. And for a few moments they simply sat, the quiet stretching between them, filled with an unspoken understanding. Then he spoke, his voice low and careful. "I didn't mean to make things awkward this morning." Lauren shook her head slightly, a soft laugh escaping her lips. You didn't, Ethan. You just surprised me. The words hung in the air. A delicate acknowledgement of the unexpected closeness that had formed over shared food and gentle conversation. And Ethan nodded, his eyes reflecting a mix of concern and sincerity that made her heart tighten. He shifted slightly, leaning forward with an honesty that made the room feel lighter, and said, I notice things, about your house, your cooking, even how you look when Dad isn't around. Lauren blinked, taken aback by the depth of his observation. He wasn't prying into private matters or being intrusive. He was simply noticing, acknowledging her existence in a way that felt both comforting and unnerving. For a moment, she was silent, unsure how to respond, because it was rare for someone to see her so clearly without judgment or expectation. It's been hard, she admitted softly, her voice almost a whisper. Loving someone who keeps drifting away, someone who doesn't always notice what you need. Ethan's eyes softened even more, and he said, I'm sorry. You deserve better than that. His words weren't meant to fix anything, but the sincerity behind them was enough to stir a deep emotion within her. She realized that he wasn't just a stepson in the formal sense. He was a young man who had grown up observing love and distance. Someone who understood what it meant to feel overlooked and yet wanted to offer care where he could. There was a pause, heavy with thought, before he asked a question that made her heart catch. Do you still love him? The question wasn't accusatory, it wasn't manipulative, was simply honest. Seeking clarity in a situation that was often clouded by unspoken emotions and routine distance. Lauren felt a mix of emotions rise within her. The truth of her love for Daniel, complicated and imperfect, and the recognition of her own needs that had gone unspoken for far too long. She realized that the house, the kitchen, and even the cinnamon maple recipe had become symbols of her desire to be seen, to be appreciated, and to connect with someone who truly understood her heart. Ethan shifted in his seat, a little uneasy but patient, waiting for her response without pushing, and Lauren appreciated that restraint. That the care behind his question wasn't about interfering in adult relationships, but about offering a space to speak honestly. She let out a slow breath and said, I do love your father, but love isn't always enough when distance grows too large. We lost our closeness somewhere along the way. Ethan nodded, absorbing her words with a quiet maturity, and for a moment, Lauren felt the weight of years of silence between them begin to ease slightly. They spoke more then, not about romance or inappropriate matters, but about the layers of family, about what it meant to care for each other despite imperfect relationships, about recognizing effort and the quiet gestures that often went unnoticed. Ethan's presence brought an unexpected comfort. It's the kind that comes from someone who sees both your strength and your vulnerability and accepts both without judgment. Lauren realized that the emotional bond forming between them was about support and understanding, about acknowledging each other as people navigating a complex family dynamic. She found herself sharing little memories of her childhood, small anecdotes about her mother and the traditions she wanted to preserve, while Ethan listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed not just curiosity, but a desire to connect and understand. The evening moved quickly, faster than she expected, and she noticed that the tension she had felt at the start of the day, the anxiety of distance from Daniel, the heaviness of routine, the isolation was softening, replaced by an unexpected sense of companionship. They laughed softly at small jokes, exchanged quiet observations about the house and neighborhood, and the cinnamon maple recipe, still warm in the kitchen, became a symbol of the bonds forming in subtle, meaningful ways. By the time the clock moved past 9, Lauren felt a calm she hadn't experienced in months, a sense that even when the world was distant or her husband was away, there could still be moments of connection, warmth, and understanding. Ethan looked at her once more, his expression steady, and said, I think this family just needs moments like this. The words struck her with quiet clarity, reminding her that family wasn't perfect, that love wasn't always grand gestures, and that healing often came in small, shared experiences, moments of recognition and genuine care. Lauren nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for the unexpected closeness of the evening. Realizing that the stepson she had once felt distant from had become a source of emotional support, a companion who helped her navigate the complexities of love, loss, and longing without needing anything more than honesty and presence. As the night deepened, the house settled into a peaceful rhythm, filled with soft shadows, quiet laughter, and the lingering warmth of a shared recipe. And Lauren understood that sometimes family, love, and understanding didn't come from perfection, but from small acts of attention, moments of listening, and the courage to speak truthfully about what mattered most. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a readiness to face the weekend, and a quiet hope that these soft, unexpected bonds could grow stronger, creating a family not defined by distance or past mistakes, but by effort, care, and shared moments of emotional honesty that would leave lasting impressions far beyond the kitchen, the recipe, or even the fleeting conversations of a rainy afternoon. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, painting golden streaks across the counters, and Lauren felt a quiet energy stirring inside her as she prepared her mother's cinnamon maple recipe once again. Not out of habit, but because she realized that the act of cooking had become more than a task. It had become a way to heal, to connect, and to reclaim a part of herself that had been overshadowed by distance and routine in her marriage. Ethan walked in shortly after, his backpack slung over one shoulder, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and paused in the doorway, taking in the warm aroma that filled the room, a scent that had already started to feel like comfort and home. "You're making it again?" he asked, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and quiet anticipation. And Lauren smiled, nodding as she stirred the mixture, steam curling up in soft wisps. "I realized something," she said, not looking at him directly. "Yesterday wasn't just about the recipe. It was about remembering who I used to be. Someone who loved deeply, someone who cared, someone who wanted to share joy even when it felt like the world kept moving without noticing." Ethan leaned casually against the counter, watching her carefully, the quiet confidence of his presence grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. And she felt the warmth of connection grow stronger between them, a bond not of obligation but of shared understanding and trust. "I think you're still that person," he said softly. And Lauren paused, taking in the simplicity of his words, realizing that recognition from someone who truly noticed her effort and heart could mean more than months of distracted attention from those closest to her. She stirred the mixture slowly, thinking about her relationship with Daniel, about the love that still lingered even though distance and busyness had made it feel fragile, and admitted quietly, "I do love your father. But love alone isn't always enough when connection fades, when we stop noticing each other, when effort is buried under life's weight." T nodded, listening with a seriousness that reflected both maturity and empathy. And she felt a sense of relief that he didn't judge her or expect her to resolve things. Instantly, he simply acknowledged her honesty and presence. The kitchen seemed to hum with quiet understanding as she continued, "But I also realized something else. Family isn't just about perfect relationships or endless harmony. It's about showing up, about moments of warmth, small gestures, and honesty, even when it's messy." Ethan smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries both hope and reassurance, and said, "Maybe this family just needs new warmth, the kind you put into that recipe." The comment made her heart lift, not because it was profound, but because it was true and simple, a reflection of what she had been trying to create, all along an environment where care, attention, and shared moments mattered more than perfection. Lauren ladled some of the mixture into a small bowl and handed it to him, watching as he tasted it carefully, savoring each bite, and felt a wave of contentment, realizing that these moments, small as they might seem, were powerful, capable of building trust, comfort, and love in subtle but meaningful ways. "I'd like that," he said, eyes meeting hers with quiet sincerity. And she felt an unexpected lightness, a sense that despite challenges, there was room for healing, growth, and connection within their home. They shared the warm dish together, laughter and soft conversation flowing naturally. And the act of eating became a symbol of something larger: patience, understanding, and the willingness to nurture relationships in thoughtful, consistent ways. Lauren reflected on how far she had come, from feeling isolated and overlooked to discovering that attention, care, and openness could foster emotional closeness, even in relationships that had once felt distant or strained. She realized that love didn't always need grand gestures. It could be found in the quiet sharing of a recipe, in the attentive listening to someone's unspoken feelings, and in the patience to allow connections to grow slowly yet meaningfully. The sun climbed higher, warming the kitchen further, and she noticed the small details: the steam rising in gentle spirals, the subtle sweetness of cinnamon and maple mingling in the air, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background, and the calm steadiness of Ethan by her side, and recognized that life's beauty often lived in these small, almost invisible moments. As they continued to talk, Ethan shared stories from college, little victories and frustrations, and she listened with genuine interest, feeling a renewed sense of involvement in his life, a role that went beyond formal labels and titles, and a satisfaction that came from being present, caring, and connecting without judgment or expectation. Lauren realized that these moments of quiet companionship, of shared warmth and understanding, could form the foundation of a stronger, healthier family dynamic, one where communication, empathy, and attention mattered more than routine or distance. She also recognized that her relationship with Daniel didn't have to be stagnant. Acknowledging her feelings, creating shared experiences, and fostering emotional honesty could allow love to breathe and grow, even amidst challenges. While Ethan's presence reminded her that family support could come in many forms, not just from spouses, but from those who cared deeply and sincerely. The morning unfolded quickly, filled with soft laughter, shared memories, and new discoveries, and Lauren felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't realized she was missing. An understanding that emotional closeness could be built in simple, deliberate ways, and that sharing herself, her skills, and her history could bring unexpected joy and healing to everyone involved. By the time the kitchen quieted, with the last spoonfuls of cinnamon maple gone and the light shifting to a softer afternoon glow, Lauren felt a renewed hope, a sense that the weekend, and perhaps the future, could be filled with more of these small, meaningful interactions that mattered more than perfection or routine. Ethan looked at her one last time before leaving for a quick walk outside, and she saw in his expression a mix of gratitude, recognition, and quiet confidence that made her realize that their bond had shifted, deepened, and strengthened, not through forced conversations or dramatic gestures, but through shared experience, honesty, and the warmth of attention. Lauren returned to the counter, cleaning up dishes, feeling a calm energy she hadn't felt in months, thinking about how this simple act of cooking, sharing, and connecting could transform moments, mend hearts, and create a sense of family and belonging that extended beyond expectations. And she understood that the cinnamon maple recipe had become more than a dish. It had become a symbol of emotional presence, care, and the courage to share pieces of herself with others. And as sunlight faded slowly into the afternoon, filling the kitchen with gentle shadows, she felt a quiet, steady optimism, knowing that love, understanding, and family could grow through small acts, through patience, and through attention to one another, creating lasting bonds that didn't rely on perfection but on honesty, shared experiences, and the gentle warmth of human connection. A warmth that could transform even ordinary mornings into moments of meaning and hope, leaving both her and Ethan surprised by how much a simple taste could reflect so much heart, trust, and the promise of brighter, more connected days ahead.